More Heart Than Talent Radio.
Live, Jeffery Combs, president and founder, Golden Mastermind Seminars Incorporated. More Heart Than Talent, Facebook Live on December 31st, 2019, the end of the era, the last day of 2019. What an exceptional year it has been for many of you and myself as well, a year of transition. Deb Lucas, welcome to the Facebook Live this afternoon. More Heart Than Talent. Topic for today's call is releasing. That means letting go. Letting go of overwhelmed feelings. And I'll cover that in great detail on this Facebook Live this afternoon. I want to give gratitude and thanks to all of you who have followed this Facebook Live throughout the calendar year 2019. And this used to be a 10:30 Eastern Standard Time live phone call podcast. So in the last 2 years, we have changed the format to a half-hour Facebook Live every Tuesday at 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Now, as we move into 2020, I've already started to book events where I'll be speaking, doing live More Heart Than Talent events. On January 18th, I'll be in Fort Lauderdale, Florida for the first time in about a year and a half at least. I will be in February, on February 29th, I'll be in Minneapolis for the first time in 2 years. And then I will be in Portsmouth, New Hampshire on March 21st. I'm in the process of booking Fort Lee, New Jersey with Diane Hunt. That will be either in February or March, and Kansas City in February or March. So I'm starting to fill in the dates. I'll also be speaking in St. Louis and Chicago in the very near future, in the late winter, early spring of 2020. So once again, thank you for tuning in to the More Heart Than Talent Facebook Live this afternoon. Now, the topic for today's live is overwhelmed feelings. So the emotions that drive anxiety, fear, and doubt are anger, hate, resentment, guilt, shame, abandonment, rejection, overwhelmed feelings, grief, and apathy. If you find yourself in any of these emotions, there's also a high probability while you're in these emotions, you're overwhelmed. Or if you find yourself connected to more than one or two of these emotions at the same time, then you'll be overwhelmed. So if you're overwhelmed, it means typically that you tend to over-obligate yourself, spend too much time thinking, validating, justifying, explaining. You'll tend to do more for others than you'll do for yourself. You'll have challenges with boundaries, and you'll have challenges with guilt and possibly shame. But guilt is one of the number one deterrents to being able to be present for many people. So if you're overwhelmed, it means that neurologically you've been conditioned to behave in a way that you're living in fight or flight. It means like this: you're flexed and flinched, and then you're worried about future events that haven't happened. Now, this also creates avoidance tendencies, procrastination, and a whole other litany of situations that will keep you in this overwhelmed state in anxiety, fear, and doubt. Now, if you follow the syllabus for today's Facebook Live, I put down 7 points to it. The cause of overwhelm, clutter and chaos, tendencies to overgive and overobligate, the power of 15 minutes, dedicated blocks of time, and accountability, then daily actions for success. With any type of breakthrough, the first situation that you learn to understand is acceptance. You would accept that you have overwhelmed tendencies and that you're committing to a situation and to the process of letting go. Now, the term letting go is a very misunderstood term that very few people understand. I am one of the people in the world who teaches people the inner game and the mechanism of letting go. Letting go is an ability. It's my, that's your, that's I, that's self. Self's ability, my ability to separate my feelings from events that would create the overwhelmed feelings. A lot of overwhelmed feelings come from not being good enough. So that's an effect, not a cause. The cause of not being good enough is being criticized, ridiculed, traumatized, sexually abused, any multitude of situations. A parent, grandparent, brother, sister, clergyman, teacher, coach, people on the playground who ridicule you, traumatize you, single you out, and point out the school system can do it also. You can be misdiagnosed, or you can miss a grade. If you're held back from a grade, you can be called names for being stupid, dumb, and other names that are very unflattering that creates this fight or flight, that creates this I'm not good enough. Now, if you start a business and you're unorganized, you're undisciplined, and you're overwhelmed, then you'll have challenges getting off the launching pad. And that's unfortunately what happens to many people. If you're unorganized, if you're undisciplined, there's a high probability that you are overwhelmed. And what happens when you're overwhelmed, it creates a situation, I don't know where to start. This is so big, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to be. I don't know where to start. And unfortunately, this is where a lot of people operate, in this overwhelmed state of anxiety, fear, and doubt. Now, letting go of this situation means that you become very skilled in understanding the cause that creates the effect, and then the emotional discipline to begin to separate the feelings from the events. So when you quantify something as, oh, it's so big, it's so difficult, well, you're just edifying being overwhelmed. It's so huge, I don't know where to start. And see, when you live in that kind of space, and your communication style fosters your anxiety. And so when you edify how bad the situation is, you're creating the overwhelmed state that you seek to avoid. So when you learn to accept the situation for what it is, when you begin to change your communication, your self-talk about the way you talk about the situation you're in, when you begin to live in the solution, when you begin to focus on the outcome, when you stop making fun of yourself and stop criticizing yourself, and you stop de-edifying yourself, I'm so dumb, I'm so stupid, this always happens. When you communicate like this continues to perpetuate the overwhelmed state. But when you start to change your communication, it says, I'm learning, I'm letting go, I'll teach myself, this is a breakthrough year. And then you focus on the solution and you focus on results in that day. What it comes down to, dedicated blocks of time and what you do daily. People ask me frequently, what did you do to overcome your situation? Well, I wasn't a classic person who gave up alcohol and walked into a 12-step meeting or walked into a treatment center and surrendered. I hit rock bottom on a stretcher, on a gurney, in a hospital, specifically for having delirium tremors. That's not the way I suggest you do. That is called rock bottom. And that was one of several rock bottoms that hit, but that was the rock bottom that for me was the pain was great enough. That's not the way to change. You don't have to hit rock bottom to change, but that is what happened to me. And that's how I really began my transformation process. I became clean and sober going on 33 years ago, and I really began that transformation process one day at a time. I mean, my life was absolutely at its lowest low, but also I was in a recovery state where I actually I felt I had a chance to turn my life around. And I began to do that one day at a time. What did I do? I started to exercise again. I had lost all ability to exercise. Exercise was something that I could hang on to. That was something that I could do daily, and I could do it every single day and start to get my health back. That was one thing that I really committed to, was getting back into a very good physical shape. I also committed to going to an AA meeting or a 12-step meeting one day at a time, every single day for 30 days and then 90 days. I didn't say for the rest of my life. I mean, once again, I condensed this down in dedicated blocks of time. I also had a job, and it was a straight commission sales job, and I told myself that I was going to go out and I was going to start to really re-engage in that job, because I was on probation. I was about to get fired for my lack of my performance for the 6 months prior, as I was hitting rock bottom as an alcoholic. And miraculously, in the next 90 days, my career started to turn around in that specific company. I stayed in that company for a little over a year, got my foundation back, started a business relatively quickly, a company called Herbalife, a network marketing company, and my career started to change, because for the first time I had some emotional clarity. But I still was overwhelmed. I still had a lot of residual emotional addictions left over from 14 years of being an addict. So nothing happened overnight for me. There was no big breakthrough for me. The biggest breakthrough I ever had was sobriety, because that gave me the emotional clarity to start over, and that was the one day at a time. To let go of your overwhelmed feelings, you require a few components. You require some emotional discipline. Instead of talking about how big something is, condense it down. Now, if you'll notice on the syllabus of the 7 bullet points, on letting go of overwhelmed feelings, one of the bullet points that's the most important And one of the features that is most important is dedicated blocks of time, the 15-minute habit. I suggest that you set aside somewhere between 10, 15, 20, and 30 minutes in increments to get tasks done so that you can start to see a sense of accomplishment by what you set out to do. And you start to, instead of being a multi-overwhelmed, you start to become a multitasker. And as you begin to multitask, it means you're able to do situations a lot more effective than you've ever done before. You can't succeed when you're overwhelmed. When you edify being overwhelmed, when you talk like you're overwhelmed, when you make situations bigger than you are, and you're an addicted embellisher. That's what a lot of people are. They embellish the situation, the severity, how bad it is, how critical it is. And when you talk like this, you virtually have talked yourself into being overwhelmed. And where did you learn to become overwhelmed? Well, typically, you will become overwhelmed in the household you grow up in because the household is unpredictable and there's a lot of fight or flight going on in the household. And if there's addictions, if there's anger, if there's rage, if there's unpredictability, if there's dysfunction, any multitude of situations like this, your body begins to react to the stimulus. And if you feel like you're behind when you go into grade school, and now you're behind when you go into junior high, and you're a C- or a C or a C+ student, it's very easy to feel like you're behind, like you're not good enough. And so by the time you're 18 years old, it's very easy to be overwhelmed because life is difficult. Situations are hard. Situations are challenging. And then if you grow up with critical people who put you in a position you have to validate, justify, explain yourself, and you're not good enough, well, now you're overwhelmed. And so here you are as a young man or a young woman in your 20s, you're overwhelmed. So if you're overwhelmed, you're going to be undisciplined, unorganized, and all of a sudden you're 30, 40, 50, and you look around and you're a hoarder, and you got all this shit in your life that you hold on to. You got a lot of debt, you got a lot of junk, you can't get your car in the garage, you tell yourself that your desk is a wreck, but you can find anything. I can find anything. Well, that's you have to get honest with yourself. You can't find anything. You want to learn to live a much more methodical, systemized routine that you can perpetuate over and over instead of being overwhelmed every single day. I will admit this is relatively challenging for most people because they have a high tolerance to being an emotional addict. I mean, you're asking yourself to unwind 20, 30, 40, 50 years of emotion. So it's new. It requires you to understand the newness of it and to be able to commit to the process of it one day at a time. A key to being overwhelmed is a longer breath cycle. So if you're overwhelmed, you're in a short breath cycle like this, in a state of fight or flight, overwhelmed, and your body flexes and flinches when situations happen in your influence. It means your body runs your brain and you automatically go into fight or flight without even knowing it. Someone asks you a question, you tell a story unrelated completely to the question that was asked because you're overwhelmed. It's easy to spot people overwhelmed because they act like it, they talk like it, they operate, they get frustrated, flustered, they get disappointed easily, they fly off the handle. I mean, you can just see how overwhelmed they are. I watch them on the airplanes. There's a wreck where they set, the place they set is a complete wreck by the time we land. That's how a lot of people operate. They bring way too much luggage on. I mean, how many of you have seen this before? This is what many people do, are overwhelmed. They overstuff, they over-obligate, they're over the top, they're overwhelmed. That's what it means. It means more than I can handle. That's what overwhelm means. So that means it's going to be your responsibility to learn to let go. Come down in your body. Breathe in a longer breath cycle. So the breath cycle is actually between here and here. So it's between your mouth and your abdomen. So when you breathe, you're reaching your abdomen instead of in this short breath cycle up here in fight or flight like this, where you have no energy. As you learn to take a longer breath cycle and breathe, that breathe is a release. The neurons that wire and fire that come together, that cluster, that form a feeling, no longer have this shelf life. Instead of clustering, they begin to dissipate and they begin to separate, and then you're no longer the mind-body connection to the events that shape the feelings. So when you are you and you are free, you become free of these overwhelmed feelings. It starts to free up your energy. You move into a state called allow. You start to allow yourself more peace, more freedom, more opportunities. And you're not so limited by your word choices and limited by your self-esteem. As you start to love yourself and start to not be so critical, you change your energy, you change your emotions. You're not in so much anxiety, fear, and doubt. This is not a how do I or a how to, this is an I am state. When you're able to be objective, that means you're an objective observer in the situation that someone else or you created, and you're able to own the situation for what it is, that's acceptance. And then daily, you take the practical action, the practical application, the simplicity of it to change a conditioned behavior. This isn't difficult, it's new. And if you continue to edify the degree of difficulty, then you'll be overwhelmed being overwhelmed. But as you understand what the letting go means, separate feelings from events. So you're not the mind-body connection to the events that continue to perpetuate the same set of feelings over and over. What many people don't understand is how emotionally addicted they are to their own emotions. Anger, hate, resentment, guilt, shame, abandonment, rejection, overwhelmed feelings, grief, and apathy. Overwhelmed is one of those common commonalities of how many people operate. And so if you have parents or you have relatives or you have an employer who gives you more than you can handle, or you have someone who calls you 7 days a week, if you have a parent who calls you 7 days a week, or they expect you to call them 7 days a week, then this is an easy recipe to get and stay overwhelmed. It's not how do I change, it's I'm committed to changing. When you're committed to changing, you change the energy that you're starting to transmit. So if you've been guilted into submission, there's a high probability you're overwhelmed. If guilt's been used to control you, then you will feel guilty if you're not doing certain situations. That's a neurochemical response that you've been conditioned to behave in. And now as you begin to recognize this and understand this, it becomes your responsibility to let go of the people who've used you emotionally to be their counterforce in their force. There will be people in life who attempt to force you into relationships, force you into submission, force you into doing certain situations. As you're able to have healthier boundaries, you're able to let go, you're able to separate your feelings from the events that shape them. Have you ever had someone call you and you go, oh my God, I can't believe it. So that's an overwhelmed feeling right then. Oh, I don't want to deal with them. Why not? So it's going to be your responsibility to address that situation in a manner that's conducive to you not being overwhelmed. When you've been conditioned to worry, when you grow up in worry, that's overwhelmed. When you're in a lot of anxiety, that's overwhelmed because you're worried about outcomes that haven't happened. So you're sitting there going, well, that's freaking great, Jeff, but how do I? It's not how do I. It's recognize it. That's metacognition. It's being aware of the situation for what it is and committing to the process of letting go. So every single year at the end of the year, people create New Year's resolutions. This is my year, baby. I mean, I just downloaded from one of the sites a woman jumping over a bridge from 2019 to 2020. So that's what many people, 2020 is my year. It's my breakthrough year. Well, I've had them, so I understand what is required. But for you to really experience a breakthrough year, it's not going to happen in the body that you struggled in. It won't happen in an overwhelmed state. It will happen in a relaxed state. And there's this myth that you perform your best when your back's against the wall. That is an absolute myth. You perform your best in a relaxed body, not in an overwhelmed body. Your objective is not to pull the game out at the end of the game. Your objective is to win the game, if you're even playing a game, if winning is even important. I watched my favorite team, the San Francisco 49ers, Sunday night. They stopped the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle Seahawks had the ball at the 12-yard line. They had it 1st and 10. All they had to do was get inside the 2-yard line or score. They got inside the 2-yard line. They had 8 attempts to score from 12 yards out, and the San Francisco 49ers shut them down on 8 consecutive plays. They gave up a little ground, but they didn't give up a touchdown. I mean, that's what you would learn to do, is gain and hold a little ground. So that's what you start to do in your overwhelmed state. If you have a lot of debt, if you live in a lot of disorganization, those two situations can be very overwhelming to many people. You have to start to whittle it down one day at a time. So if you live in a very unorganized situation, you're in a very you live in a very unorganized house, you live in a very unorganized world, will find one situation that you can isolate on and start to whittle it down and start to create some accomplishments, create some clearly defined short-term goals. This is where you have dedicated blocks of time that are non-negotiable. Now, if you had a job, people wouldn't be able to walk into your office. Your dog wouldn't be able to come into your office. Your kids wouldn't be able to come into your office. The contractor wouldn't ring the doorbell. So there's certain situations that are non-negotiable. You wouldn't be able to take phone calls on someone else's job unless the boss wasn't watching. So there are certain situations that are non-negotiable when you own a business and you're committed to the process of change. So that means that one of the areas that you learn to do is you learn to focus on a solution and a result rather than focusing on how overwhelmed you are. What many people do is they focus on the very situation they seek to avoid. I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to hear the word no. I don't want to fail. And they put so much energy into not failing that they don't succeed because they're not focused on learning the skills, habits, and mindset of the very vocation that they have this romance that's going to give them the freedom. Now, if that's you, I'm talking to you. I'm talking right to you, suggesting you begin to understand that if you continue to edify what you don't want to have happen, you're actually magnifying it. You'll attract your reality, the very situation you seek to avoid to fulfill your disappointment. And if you go, well, that's crazy, it is. You're correct. What's crazy is you keep doing it over and over to perpetuate the same set of feelings, to create the same outcome, not understanding why you do what you do to create this neurochemical high that gives you this low that keeps you emotionally addicted to a set of disappointments. And if life has been disappointing, now's a great time to take a good look at it and change the behavior. You do that one day at a time with a longer breath cycle, accepting where you are, forgiving yourself for the mistakes you've made and letting go of other people who have hurt, harmed, traumatized you. Hurt, harm, blame, shame game no longer is your name. You're able to easily and effortlessly let people go. And you stop these two words, yeah, but. Yeah, but that's easy for you to say. It's not easy. It was new for me. It wasn't difficult and it wasn't hard. It was actually liberating to be able to change. So I wasn't continuing to create the same outcome over and over. What was hard was being an addict. What was challenging was how much control I was in 7 days a week. What was challenging was the self-talk that perpetuated being a chronic addict and an alcoholic at rock bottom. That was challenging. Sobriety became much easier for me. The same thing would happen to you. This other side that you think is going to be so difficult, it's actually a lot easier once you cross over and stop trying to control an outcome that hasn't happened and you let go of being overwhelmed. That's what being overwhelmed is. You're so overwhelmed about what hasn't happened that it overwhelms you to think about what hasn't happened. And then you're so overwhelmed thinking about how you're going to change that you can't start. So what you do is avoid changing to perpetuate the same set of feeling over and over. That is the definition of insanity. And unfortunately, that's what many people do. So Matt Smith says he's committed to 2020 being his year. Now, here's what I suggest that you understand. What does that actually mean? If 2020 is your year, because 1997 was my year. 1997 was my breakthrough year. I went from, I'd achieved six figures a couple of times in my career as an entrepreneur, but just barely. I just barely crossed over 6 figures. So I went from having a six-figure year, and there were several years in between that also. So I went from being $100,000 in credit card debt in 1996 to having a multiple six-figure year in 1997. How did that happen? Number one, I wasn't lucky. Number two, I already developed great habits and great skills. So I already had the skill set and the habits. I also passed on a guaranteed job that one of my friends offered me that would have paid me a low six-figure income, because I had determined that I was not going to work for someone else again, and I was not going to move to Malibu, California for six figures to work for two friends of mine who were both addicts who I didn't trust. So even though it looked good on the outside, it was just another shiny object that I wasn't seduced by because I had 9 years of sobriety at the time. They both told me I was crazy, to grow up, get real, and when was I going to stop chasing rainbows? So I didn't pay attention to them. I paid attention to my intuition. My intuition said, this is not a good opportunity. That's another situation. You have to listen and hear what's really meant, not what's said, so you can determine what's going to be your best outcome. You want to focus on being your best and the best possible outcome, not by being positive, but by being objective, but by being real, by being candid, by being honest, by understanding, by being aware. That is called consciousness. And you want to be and stay consciously aware, separating yourself from anxiety, fear, and doubt. The minute you go into overwhelm mode, you've gone into doubt. And then your communication style will be, I guess, kinda. And if you're using kinda, guess, sorta, that's your communication, the way you speak, then you're telegraphing your doubt. As you become clear in the way you communicate, as you're able to articulate your feelings into words, now you're not overwhelmed. When someone asks you a question and you tell a story, you're overwhelmed. When you can't answer a question, you tell a story, you're overwhelmed. And it's going to be your responsibility to understand how overwhelmed you are. Here's some key points. Dedicated blocks of time. 15 minutes and half an hour windows. 15 minutes, half hour, and hours. Dedicated blocks of time to that. 15 minutes of exercise, 30 minutes of exercise, 1 hour, minute of exercise, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour devoted to prospecting, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour devoted to lead generation, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour devoted to cleaning your office, cleaning your house, cleaning your garage. I mean, you dedicate blocks of time. Time becomes valuable. If time's not valuable, you're overwhelmed. Days get away from you because you're overwhelmed. Days are important to you because days have value. When your time is valuable, you're not overwhelmed. When you're able to cut someone off relatively quickly and say, thanks, but no thanks. I had someone call me up, wanted to hire me, but then he wanted me to convince him. I said, I appreciate you calling me, but I'm going to let you go. I let the person go in less than 7 minutes because this conversation did not qualify for my time. That's what you want to learn to do, is have a value placed on your time. When you have a value in your time is valuable, you are valuable, you are not overwhelmed. If you'd like to find out more about how I can assist you to let go of being overwhelmed or let go of your anxieties, fear, or doubts, or how you can scale your business, improve your emotional mindset so you can live at a much higher level of consciousness, or change who you attract in 2020, then send me a message on Facebook Messenger and I will return your message ASAP within 24 hours. Now here we are on the end of the era. 2019 is almost in the books. So it's 1:30 in California. That means at 12 midnight tonight, baby, old anxiety is going to come on. New Year is here upon us, 2020. So if you're telling yourself that 2020 is your year, baby, then you want to really understand what that means. If 2020 is your year and it's your breakthrough year, it's interesting, 2020 vision. If it's really your year, and you're committed to that, then you'll have daily discipline, daily routine. You'll have dedicated blocks of time for production and relaxation, and your time will be valuable. Jeffery Combs, President and Founder, Golden Mastermind Seminars Incorporated. You have a great day.